Is your home more than just a place to live? Is it a powerful asset that generates income, generates wealth, increases in value, and secures your long-term future? Imagine your home acting like an investment, one that creates passive income and creates generational wealth that you can pass down to your children. Now, if that sounds like what you've been thinking, let's dive in and answer 3 key questions. How do I know if my home is a worthwhile investment? How do I move my home into a limited company? And when should I buy my new home? Now, if you're new to my channel, hi, I'm Jonathan. I founded SPV Mortgages, which is a specialist finance brokerage. We've worked with hundreds and hundreds of property investors since opening, and my channel is all about the experiences I have with them, sharing them with you. Now, if you're thinking of selling your home to a limited company, there are 3 key steps you need to take in order to avoid costly mistakes. So number 1, check the rental potential of your property. What you're doing is you're effectively changing the property from a home into a buy-to-let or an investment. That investment needs to produce a monthly recurring revenue, i.e. rental income. So the very first thing that you want to do is speak to local estate agents, get at least 3 to 4 rental valuation quotes, and understand exactly what the property will generate. That rental income needs to be sufficient to cover any mortgage debt on a monthly basis. So the second is to assess the value of your home. Now, the best advice I can give you is reach out to at least 3 or 4 local estate agents, get their opinion. If you were to put the property on the market right now, what would it sell for? And ideally, what we're looking at and what we're looking for is at least 25% equity in the property. So in other words, the property needs to support a 75% mortgage based upon the current debt. That will put you in a very strong position. It could, and I'll go into this in a bit more depth later on in the video, but it could cover not only the selling costs, but also the buying costs for your new home. Now, what's important here is if the loan to value of the current debt against the value of your property is more than 75%, then you're going to have to add some cash savings to make up the difference, because most SPV lenders are offering 75% mortgages. Okay, so you've assessed the rental income and you've assessed the value of your home. So 2 critical numbers that we need in order to justify moving a property into an SPV limited company. The next step is to check rental demand. So is the property in an area with a strong rental demand? You don't want to be moving an asset that's personally owned into an SPV limited company if there's no demand to actually rent the property, because how are you ever going to generate the rental income to support the mortgage debt? And furthermore, most lenders won't lend in areas where there is a low rental demand. So taking those initial steps will help you set yourself up for success in regards to identifying if the property that you're living in is a suitable long-term investment asset. That's exactly what we're trying to get to by you following those 3 steps. So here's how to navigate the process of actually selling your property to an SPV limited company. And this could be a complete game changer for you. It could be the start of building your property portfolio, but it's got to be done correctly, and there's a few things that you need to know about, which we're going to dive into now. So first off, you've got to understand that this is a sell and a buy transaction. Essentially, you're going to be selling your property, which is personally owned, and your SPV limited company is going to be buying it. So you'll need 1 solicitor on the sell side and 1 solicitor on the buy side. Now on the sell side, you can use any legal firm you like. But on the buy side, which is the SPV limited company side, you'll have to work with a solicitor that's on an approved list for the recommended lender. So before you move forwards with instructing any solicitors, you've got to check with your specialist finance broker which lender you're going to be moving forwards with, and then ask them for the panel of solicitors that you can work with, and then contact that panel and obviously instruct them moving forwards. But essentially, this is a sell and a buy transaction. The most crucial step is to check the loan to value. So that is the mortgage debt in relation to the value of your property. Now, you're going to be in a lot of luck if the loan to value is less than 75%, because typically the sweet spot with SPV mortgages is around 75% these days. So if you can borrow 75% of the value of the property, repay the existing mortgage lender that you have on the personal side, you might be able to release some equity in order to cover professional fees, stamp duty, and even release some money to either expand the portfolio or help you purchase your new residential property. Now here's where things get super exciting. So if you have a loan to value currently on your main residence or a buy-to-let, which is hovering at around say 50%, you've got 25% usable equity. So that can unlock some massive potential for you. You can release that equity not just to pay for things like stamp duty and professional fees, but you can unlock that value to cover the cost of the deposit for your new residential property, or even to expand your portfolio. But better yet, you can unlock that value to upgrade your property so that you can charge higher rents. So in a nutshell, if you've got usable equity within the property, it is a complete game changer. It will change the cash flow, it will change the condition of your home, it will set you up for success moving forwards. If you don't, then you just need to be mindful that you're going to have to inject some cash into the transaction in order for it to be successful. So when should you actually move your property into a limited company? Now let's break this down into two parts. Part A is all about moving your residential property into an SPV limited company, and part B is moving your personally owned buy-to-let into an SPV limited company. So the key to moving your residential property into an SPV limited company is all about timing. Timing is so critical with this. Now, the key here is you cannot move forwards with moving your residential property into an SPV without having in place a new residential property to move forwards with. And here's why. So you're going to need to submit two applications, one on the SPV side and one on the residential side. Now the SPV lender is known as an unregulated lender. That is unregulated lending, meaning that it's investment based, not home ownership based. So in order for the SPV lender to feel very comfortable lending on your home, they need to be sure that you're never ever going to move back there. Now, in order for them to feel comfortable with that, we have an onward residential purchase lined up with a mortgage offer obviously in place. That offer then sends over to the SPV lender, and the SPV lender then has all the comfort in the world knowing that this transaction is not going to go through without this transaction, meaning that these lenders that operate in the unregulated investment space will be more than happy to lend on your property on an SPV mortgage basis. Now, the other way to do it is you have to move out of your residential property into rented accommodation. Your existing residential property needs to be let, ideally for at least 6 months. You need to be in a tenancy agreement for at least 12 months, having let the property for at least 3. So in other words, you are no longer living in the property that you own, you are currently a tenant. And at that point, some lenders become comfortable that you may not move back to the property. It is a very tricky transaction. It's not something that we recommend this end because the success rate is pretty low, simply because from a feasibility standpoint, the lenders just can't get around the fact that because you're in rented, the probability of you coming back to the property is low, which is what we're trying to disclose to the lenders, but unfortunately they don't see it that way. They see it on the basis that, look, you don't actually own any property, this is the property that you do own, and the probability of you coming back to that property is very high, hence they're not lending. So the ideal way, and this is why it's really critical to get the timing right, the ideal way to do this type of transaction is to have an onward residential purchase lined up and then transact the existing home into the SPV. That way, most lenders will lend and you'll have a very successful application. Now, moving your personally owned buy-to-let into an SPV limited company is actually a little bit more straightforward, simply because the property is already let and you are currently living in another property. That could be your home, it could be a rental property as well. The point being is that the property has historically always been let, which provides massive comfort to the lenders. Now, there's a few things that you need to take into account when moving a personally owned property into an SPV limited company, and that is the capital gains tax. This could make or break the actual deal. So for example, the transaction will include you paying capital gains tax on the sale of the asset and the SPV paying stamp duty land tax. Now, stamp duty land tax is very simple to calculate. There's a calculator on the website, you can use it to your heart's content. Capital gains tax on this side is quite a tricky calculation. Based upon that number, that will then dictate whether or not this transaction goes through. But because sometimes the capital gains tax can be so high, the question then is, well, is the property actually a good long-term investment? So moving your personally owned buy-to-let into an SPV limited company is actually a bit more straightforward. And the reason being is the property's already let, which provides massive comfort to the lender that you're never going to live there. And that's exactly what they're looking for. Now, when it comes to moving a personally owned buy-to-let into a limited company, you've got to be conscious of one tax in particular, which is the capital gains tax. Now, it's the capital gains tax that will actually make or break a deal. If the capital gains tax is too high, you're simply not going to go through with the transaction. But the other thing that you've got to think about is even if there is usable equity within the property that will cover things like the capital gains tax, professional fees, and stamp duty, you've got to take it to another level, and you've got to question whether or not this is a good long-term asset that you want to hold over a multi-decade period of time. Because there is no point, in my opinion, moving a personally owned property into an SPV if you're only going to hold it for a few years. It's completely pointless. So what's critical about this is understanding what the investment prospects of the property that you're looking to transfer are today and what they will be potentially in the future. Now, no one has a crystal ball, granted, but you can look at things like area, rental demand, what's going on, regeneration, all those sorts of things will play into your decision-making process. But you've got to understand that, once again, you're selling and your company is buying. So you could sell and your company, SPV company, could buy something else, perhaps utilizing the capital which is in that property in a much more effective way. So I'd always stress to clients, take it to that level, carry out that research, and be completely confident that what you're doing is the right decision. Now, are you thinking about diving into property projects, buying low, selling high, refurbing, getting your hands a little bit dirty, creating massive value, and then recycling that value into other properties to build your portfolio? Watch this.